Hello everyone, welcome to Sprint 3. So, this week we're going to dive straight into it. I've actually already done a little bit of the kind of the setup-y kind of stuff that usually I do in front of you with the, cloning a Git repository and all of that kind of stuff. I've actually done all of that beforehand this time, just because you're familiar enough with the process now that you don't need to see it again every time. So here we are in the workspace directory, and if I run ls, I can see that we have a Sprint 3 workshop directory that I've made special for this occasion. So if we dive into this and then have a look at what's in here, there's an index CSS file and an index HTML file. Now I've actually got all of this open over here, so I can open all of this up and we can have a look at it. So here is the index HTML file. And you can see it displayed here on the page with the lovely bisque background, as is my want. And then there's an index CSS file as well, which is just kind of like laying out some of the margins and stuff like that. Now here I've actually written out a few learning objectives for this session because I'm a professional, I'm a teacher, as you're aware. And the learning objectives for this session are we're going to work with JavaScript and we're going to kind of further understand its relationship to HTML and CSS. So I talked about that a little bit in the intro video for this sprint, kind of going back, revisiting that birthday card analogy, JavaScript being the interactive element to our web page or whatever it is that we're working on. And then we're going to learn how to link a JavaScript file to our HTML document so we can actually start using it so these things can work together. And then on the actual JavaScript front, we're going to learn about using console log, which is obviously talk about all of this more later, but console log is a function that we can use as sort of like a window into our code, a little window into what it is that we're working on. We're going to learn about variables and data types. So if you've had any experience with object-oriented programming before, you'll kind of be familiar with some of these concepts. But if you're not, that's okay because we're kind of assuming no prior knowledge here. Then we're going to explore functions a little bit. What are functions? How do we make them? We're going to talk about if-else statements. So this is kind of this idea of flow control, the idea that we're going to want to be able to orchestrate the kind of sequence and order in which things run inside our program. That's where if-else statements and flow control comes in. And then functions returning a value. So once we've talked about functions and what it is exactly that they do, we are going to write a function that can return something, give us something back that then we can use with our variables and data types. So over here in the HTML document, you can see this, all of the stuff you're seeing here. This is all the stuff here, nothing particularly special going on there. Now, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to make a JavaScript file. That's the first step. So if we open up the terminal, like this, make sure we're in the right place, we are, and then touch a new index.js file. JS stands for JavaScript. So now we'll open this back up, get this back again. Now you can see the index.js file has appeared, and it has nothing inside it. There's nothing in here whatsoever. Oh, uh-oh, what does this have to say? Oh well, I don't care about that. That doesn't seem interesting to me. Alright, so here we are in the index.js file. Now, the first thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to want to have anything happen, right? We want anything, we want to write anything, and we want anything to happen, and then we want to see it, see our kind of our code, whatever it is that we write, reflected over here in our HTML file. So this is where we're going to start exploring this concept of console log. So console log is a function, which we're going to talk about later, and it can take an argument, which we're also going to talk about later, and then it will print the argument out into the console, which you see I have here open in my developer window. Again, I open this developer window by pushing Command-Shift-I, opens it, close, open and close like that. Or you can right-click and push one of these things. That one, I think. Yeah, that one. So, let's write some JavaScript. We're going to write console.log, and then I'm going to pass in a real, kind of generic, boring message like, welcome to Sprint 3. That's classic. That's just so classic. Now, what we're going to want is we're going to want, when I refresh this page, for this message, welcome to sprint 3, to appear over here in the console. But here's the thing, spoiler alert, just like last time, it's not going to. I already know it's not going to, but let's watch that happen anyway. See here, I refresh the page, nothing happens. And the reason, same as when we didn't link our CSS file to our HTML, we haven't linked our JavaScript file to our HTML. So let's do that. Open up the index.html again, and then here in the head, just like with the CSS file, we're going to put in a new line. Now this is actually, the syntax for this looks a little bit different. We're going to pass in a script tag, and then the script tag takes a source element, src, which stands for source, and then we pass in the name of the file which we're working with, which in this case is index.js. And then we close it, and then this, of course, it being HTML and there being no consistency, we then have to close it like that. So just like here, as I was griping on about last time, the CSS file takes an href and you don't need to close it for some reason. It's known as a self-closing tag. Script files, they're not self-closing, and then you just kind of leave nothing here in the middle, just nothing in the middle, and then you got to close it again. Just another example of why building new technology on top of old technology, on top of even older technology, on top of even older technology kind of leads to like weird, inconsistent rules like this, but there you go. Now, all going well, and I don't actually know if all is going to go well. All going well, I'm going to refresh this page, and then we're going to see our message pop up here in the console. Whew, that's good. I like that. I like it when things actually work. So you can see here the welcome to sprint 3 message is shown up, which is what we put in here in the console log. And then I don't know what's going to happen if I click this. Let's find out. There you go. It opens up the index.js file, and then it shows us the index.js file, and then it shows us here that this is our line. That's the JavaScript we're working in. So you can see here, this is the sources tab on the Chrome developer tools, where you can see all of the sources, like all of the documents that it's working from. So here's my HTML file, here's my CSS file, there's my JavaScript file that I've just created. Now back to the console. So we could change this message to whatever we wanted to. Like this, like we're kind of all familiar with how that works now. I hit refresh, you see the message changes. So this console log, like it's a real simple tool. It's like, hey, I've got something and I want it to pop out over into my console. But man, is it useful! Like this concept of like this concept of wanting to be able to see something in the console that you have written into your JavaScript files, or whatever kind of code you're writing. This is so useful. Like you are going to use this over and over and over and over again, because when you're writing code, when you're writing JavaScript code, any kind of code really, things are going to go wrong all the time. Everything is going to go wrong, and when everything goes wrong, it's really useful if you have a little window like this, a little way that you can kind of peer into what's going on. So console log is very, very useful for this reason. Now, let's look at what the next thing we're going to explore is. The next thing we're going to talk about is variables and data types. So data types means that there are a set number of different types of data that we can deal with in JavaScript, and we're going to talk about all of those individually. And we're also going to assign those data types to variables. So let's look at how that goes. So I'm going to bust this out now, and then I'm going to make a new variable, and this new variable is going to be my name. So when you're declaring a new variable in JavaScript, you just type out the name of the variable you want it to be. In this case, I'm calling it name, and then I'm going to set it equal to my name, which is Joseph with the $sign spelling, canonical spelling of my name, as you're all aware now. Now, this is a data type known as string. So this is a string. Now, there are, by the way, this thing here, I put these little double quotes in. What this means is that I'm opening up a comment. So anything that occurs after 2 sets of slashes like this, it won't be interpreted by the computer. So I could illustrate that actually. Let's illustrate that. So here, if we go back over and refresh this, we see that welcome to sandwiches is still displaying. But if I put 2 slashes in here, like that, and then I save it and I refresh, welcome to sandwiches doesn't display anymore. So the reason that welcome to sandwiches no longer displays is because I have turned this into a comment. Maybe I'll just make this a little bit bigger so you can see it a little better. So now that this is a comment, the computer is not going to read it. Comments are just for us. Comments are for developers. Comments are for anybody who is looking at this kind of stuff, right? So if I get rid of these again, refresh the page, you can see it reappears, so that's great. So by putting these double slashes here at the end of this line and then writing string afterwards, the computer doesn't see this. This is just for our benefit. And the reason that I've done this is because this data type, something enclosed in a pair of little quote marks like this is known as a string. So what is a string? A string is a word. A string, that's really as easy as I can say it. You know, if you wanted to have a sentence, a paragraph, the name of something, you know, anything like that, any words, they are going to be called string. That is the name of this data type. And my name is Joseph. So now let's make this a little bit more interesting. Let's move this console log welcome to sandwiches line down here, and then instead of being welcome to sandwiches, now I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to pass in name, and now if we hit refresh, it says my name. So you see what's going on here? I'm assigning this value, the string with my name, to this variable. So this data type. This is an example of the data type. It's a string with Joseph inside. The variable is this thing here, what I'm assigning it to, and then I'm console logging out the name, and we can see it's logging here in the terminal. Now, an important thing to note here is that I could call this whatever I want. Like, it doesn't need to be called name. I could call this sandwich, and then over here I could console log out sandwich, and then I can refresh the page, and you can see it's still doing the same thing. It's still console logging out Joseph. But let's say this was now sandwich, and I had forgotten to change it, and this still said name. When I refresh the page, it's not going to work because that's interesting. It does still seem to be working. I don't know what to tell you about that. So like, if I just put in something like this should not work. Yeah, there we go. Uncaught reference blah, 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 is not defined at index there. So I've tried to put in something that it did not expect, and it's freaking out about it. But see here, look at what happens now. If I put this inside a pair of quote marks, like this, then I refresh the page, now it logs it out. So this is a really crucial thing to understand. Putting something inside quote marks turns it into a string. So if I get rid of the quote marks, JavaScript, the browser, is trying to find a variable called this, is trying to find a variable called blah, 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 and then when I refresh the page, it's like, whoa, I don't know what that is. I don't know what this variable is. But then if I put it inside a pair of quote marks, like this, now the browser interprets it as a string, and we can see that it shows up there. Really what I'm trying to illustrate here is that, like, you can call variables anything, but that generally speaking you want to call them for like the kind of thing they are. So in this situation, this string with my name, probably a good name for that is going to be name, right? So I'm just going to go here like this. Now we're all clear about what's going on. We're talking about data types. This is our first data type, and it is a string. So let's talk about some other data types. Let's talk about numbers. We're going to want to know about numbers. So age is going to be the new variable I'm defining, and it is going to be equal to my age, which is 25. And then like this. So this is known as an integer. An integer is a whole number. So you might remember this from math class if you've done it. There's two different kinds of numbers in JavaScript. There's integers and there's floats. And floats are basically just like floating point numbers. So if I wanted to chuck some decimal places in here or whatever, then at that point it's become a floating point number. But we're just going to focus on integers for now, whole numbers. So you can see I've got my age of 25. I could console log that out. Console log age. Oops. And then we go over here, hit refresh, and now it says 25. Now, let's look at this. Okay, so see here, if I zoom, yeah, I can zoom right in. See how this is blue? It's kind of subtle. You might not be able to see it that well. It's blue because it is a number. right? So the browser is kind of like doing a handy little thing for us here. It's trying to show us that what we're dealing with is a number. So let's look at this. So if I put here, maybe I'll keep that line actually, and then I'll duplicate it, and below that line, I'm going to put in a string, and the string is going to be a string of 25. So now if I go over here and I refresh again, see how this one's blue and this one's black? It's really subtle, it's hard to see, but what you're seeing here is the difference between this, which is an integer, and this, which is a string. So this, this 25 inside quote marks, and this 25 not inside quote marks, these look very similar from our point of view, but there is a world of difference between these two things to a computer. So here, if I refresh again, you see it's the same. 25, that's a string. 25, that's an integer, that's a number. So why is this important? Why is this an important distinction? Let's explore that for a second. Okay, look at this. So here I've got 25 inside a pair of quote marks. What happens if I go 25 plus 25, also inside a pair of quote marks? Now, down here, I'm going to go 25 plus 25, not inside quote marks. And let's see what happens when I refresh the page. So the top one reads 2,525 because it is adding these two strings together. So it's basically just taking two things. These are words, remember, these aren't numbers. From the computer's point of view, these are words. So it's taking these two words and it's smashing them together, and the result is 2525. Whereas here, the computer is able to interpret these two things as numbers because they're not inside quote marks, and now it knows that I'm dealing with numbers, and so it adds them together for me. 25 plus 25 is 50. So you can see here, just from these two data types that we've been exploring already, they make a really, really big difference in terms of how the computer is going to understand these things. And so what does that look like in practice? What it looks like in practice is if you're making an age, if you're deciding on what an age is going to be, and you accidentally put a pair of quote marks around your number 25, this is going to screw everything up. Because let's say here, maybe, all right, so here's a good example. I'm not going to put the quote marks around it for now. So this is a number, 25 is a number, and then here in the console log, I'm going to console log age plus 1. And I'm going to refresh the page. Age plus 1 is 26. I'm 25. I get a year older. The console logs out 26. But what if I accidentally put this as a string? And now the JavaScript in the browser, instead of interpreting it as an integer, which is what we want, they're going to interpret it as a string. Now, when I refresh the page, it's going to come up 251 because it is adding the number 1 onto the end of the word 25. So, I mean, I feel like I've kind of been laboring over this a little bit too much, you know, like, but this is really, really crucial for you to get your head around this early on, is that the way that the computer interprets data types makes a really, really big difference in your ability to, like, program and not have things go terribly wrong. Like, me getting 1 year older and suddenly being 255, like Edward Cullen style. So, let's talk about another data type, because we've been laboring on this one for a little bit too long. Now we're going to talk about booleans. So booleans are true-false. That's all there is to it. So we've covered strings, we covered numbers, now we're going to move along to booleans. So boolean, or bool for short, it's kind of the simplest one to get your head around, really. It's a true or false. So let's make a boolean for me. That's going to be is cool, and that is going to be undeniably true. Bool. Cool. All right, so now let's print that out. Console log is cool. You can see here, comes back true. Change it to false. Console log it out, comes back false. Real simple. Booleans are they're very easy to get your head around. True or false. And again, you know, like classic kind of situation. Just don't put it inside quote marks, because if you put that inside quote marks, then instead of being a boolean, it's going to be a string with the word false, and then that's going to screw everything up for you further down the track. Might look pretty much the same, like if I refresh the page now, pretty much the same, only difference is a slight color change, but that slight color change and what it represents is really, really massive, so make sure you don't mess that up. Now, what's the next thing we're going to do? Let's talk about an array now. So that's the another thing we have here on our list, an array. And now we are going to, let's have an array which is a list of my children. So I have 2 children. Now the way that you declare an array, I'm going to just do it and then I'll talk about what it means later on. The way you declare an array is by putting a pair of these square brackets in. So these little square brackets, you'll be seeing them a lot. And then you put things into the array like this, and then you put commas in between them. So an array, basically, you can think about an array like a collection. So this is an array of strings of the names of my children, and then I'm saving it into the children array. So a lot of the time, like, you know, it's cool, this variable represents one thing, this variable represents one thing, but sometimes you're going to want to have variables that can represent lots of different things or collections of things, and this is where arrays come into the mix. Array. Oh, but I mean, see, this screws up my spacing. Now I have to put these all the way over here. I know it's a little bit pedantic to kind of like do this kind of stuff, but you know, code formatting, very important. That's close enough. Okay, cool. So now, let's look at how do we access stuff inside an array? What happens if I console log out just the entire array, children? Let's see. Look at this. You can see it comes up and it actually gives us like this nice little drop down thing. So it shows us there's 2 things inside the array, Addie and Dexter, which are the names of my children. I can push this, pops it down. And you can see here, item 0 in the array. Remember, in programming, everything starts at 0. Programmers always start counting at 0. So the 0th item in the array is my daughter's name, Addie, and the first item in the array is my son's name, Dexter. And we can pull those out individually as well by using square bracket notation. Square bracket notation. So we've got the children variable here inside the console log statement. I'm going to chuck a couple square brackets around it and then put in a 0. Now look what happens. Brings back just my daughter's name. Or I put in a 1. Brings back just my son's name. So this is the index. We're accessing a specific item at an index within the children array. So just to make sure you really get that, I'll refresh this again. You can see there's 2 objects in the array. And the index is listed here. The index of my daughter's name is 0. The index of my son's name is 1, because that is the position that they appear in the array. And then, you know, I could put another thing in. Let's say I have another child. I was thinking about this just the other day, actually. If I had another child, I'd want to call the child Milo. So let's say now I want to access Milo. You can see if I refresh the array, Milo's there now. If I want to access Milo, he or she is going to be number 2, because remember, 0 represents Addie, 1 represents Dexter, 2 represents Milo. You can see, refresh the page there. There he or she is, Milo. So that is an array. Now the next thing we're going to talk about is objects. Just going to take a sip of water. You excite yourself for what's coming. Okay. So objects. Now objects they're kind of like arrays in that they are collections of data, collections of things, but you construct them in a slightly different way, and they work, arrays work by index. So like we just talked about, this is at index 0, this is at index 1, this is at index 2. So let's say we wanted to, instead of having to use these indexes, because like, what if I didn't know the index of something? What if I had a really, really, really big array and I didn't know where Dexter was or Milo was or my 56th, you know, child, and I wanted to find them by name? What if I wanted to find them by name, but all I have is the indexes or whatever, you know? So this is where objects come in. So I'm going to make a new object now, and it is going to be me, the object of me, all encompassed. So the way that you declare an object is you write the name of the variable, just like we have all of these other times, equal sign, and then we open up a pair of curly brackets like this. Now, inside the curly brackets, this is where we're going to declare our key value pair combinations. So the key value pair, here we're going to put a name property and set it to be equal to Joseph, like this. And then we're going to set an age property, set it to be equal to 25, and then we'll do the children, is cool, true, undeniably, and then children, and then here I just copy this, paste that in there. Cool, so you can see, let's look at the structure of this for a second. We've got the key, which is in this case name, and then the value, Joseph, a comma, key, value, comma, key, value, comma, key, value, and then no comma at the end. I think maybe you can actually put a comma on the end if you really want to. I'm not sure about that, but don't take my word for it. So now over here, let's get our trusty console log back out again, and now we're going to console log out the Joseph object. Oops. Sorry, I normally write in a different programming language that requires semicolons on the end of things, so you might see I just instinctively put those on the ends of all of my lines, but you don't actually need to in JavaScript. You can, but you don't actually need to. Cool, so here's the Joseph object. Let's have a little look-see at what we got here. What an object. So we can bust this open. You can see we've got the name, got it as cool, got all the children, got my age. We can even bust it out further, bust out the children array, have a look at everything that's in there. Pretty cool. So there's actually a more efficient way of doing this though, because look at this. I already have all of this information, the name, the age, the is cool, the children, all of that stuff. I already have all of that stored in variables already. This is, I'm kind of doubling up here. I've got it all written up here, and then I'm writing it all again down here. So let's not worry about that. Now let's look at building an object. Cool. So now I'm just going to get rid of my writing in all of the data manually here, and I'm going to replace it with these variables. So replace name with name, replace age with age, replace is cool with is cool, and then replace the children array with the new children array. So if we go over here and refresh, you can see it's the same. No difference. It's still all the same stuff because all of this data here, now I'm just kind of pointing at it. I'm saying, hey, the key is name and the data is this variable that I saved up here. For the key of age, the value is age, which is this variable I've saved up here. So it's a little bit confusing that like you're seeing the same word twice in a row here. You know, name, age, is cool. But the thing that you need to realize is that like this first one is the key. This is the thing that's kind of referencing like, what is the name of this data? And then the second one is the value. What is the actual data itself? So I could change it, right? Like let's say instead of measuring whether I am or am not cool, oh no, this is false. That's not right. Instead of measuring whether I am or am not cool, let's say what I'm measuring is lame, right? Now what's going to happen here, it's going to freak out. And I'll tell you why it's going to freak out, because the variable, I've changed the name of the variable to is lame. Oh, wait a second, hang on. That's better. So I've changed the name of it to is lame. And you can see down here, the is cool one, it's still pointing towards a variable called is cool, but we don't have a variable called is cool anymore. So when I refresh this, it's like, whoa, what the hell are you talking about, buddy? Is cool is not defined. I don't know what you mean by is cool. And the reason is because I've changed the name of the variable that it's pointing to. So if I wanted to fix this, I would need to change this to is lame. And now the whole thing's just it'll work, but the whole thing's really confusing because the key is cool, but the value is lame. So that's just messy, don't worry about that. What I was just trying to illustrate there though is that the names that you choose here, that's all up to you. And then here you just need to make sure that you're actually passing in valid variables, otherwise it's going to crash like we saw over there. So what are the advantages of objects like this? I reckon the advantage is that we're able to pluck little bits of data out by the key. So let's look at how we might do that. Let's say I want to pull out just my name. I go joseph.name. Console log that out. Just Joseph comes back. Or joseph.age. 25. Or what if I even got fancy? What if I went joseph.children and then passed in a square bracket notation. Look at that, Dexter. So now you can see, let's just unpack this line for a second. First I'm going to console log out the object, Joseph, but it doesn't stop there. Then I'm going to console log out its children property. But that's not enough. Now I'm going to console log out specifically the first of index, so which is really the second value inside the children object, inside the Joseph object. And you can see here, Dexter comes out. So this is the power of objects, right? This thing here, diving in, diving in, diving in, that is where they get really cool, is the fact that you can have a big complicated piece of data like this, and then pull out just specifically the bit that you want by using dot and square bracket notation. So that kind of ends the first segment of what it is that we're talking about, the data types sort of discussion. I'm going to take another drink of my water now, and then we're going to move on to what are functions. Oh, delicious. Okay, so let's look at functions. What are functions? Cool. So we're going to write a function. That's the first thing we're going to do. We've actually been looking at functions already, right? Console log is a function already. But let's make our own one. So I am going to make a function that is called print name. So the way that you write a function in JavaScript, you write the word function, nice and simple, and then you write the name of the function, which in this case is going to be print name. And now, then I'm just gonna write it out, and then we'll go through it line by line actually. So I'm gonna open up a pair of these round braces. Gonna put the word person in here. Then I'm gonna open up some more of these curly braces, and inside here I'm gonna go console log person name. So what is happening here? First we're declaring the function, then we're giving the function a name. Giving the function a name is just like giving the variable a name. I could have called this whatever I wanted to, but it's going to print a name, so I decided to call it print name. Now, this is the tricky bit. Here, what's going on inside these round brackets? I am passing in a person object, and it's a generic person object. I could pass in any person object that I wanted to in here, and then it's going to, this is what happens inside the function, right? This is the actual execution of the function. It is going to console log out the name variable that is stored inside my person object. So let's look at this in practice. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to call my function. So I'm going to write print name. And then inside the round braces, I'm going to pass in Joseph, which is my person object. And you can see here, when I refresh the page, it prints out Joseph. So this is a little bit complicated. Let's look at what's actually going on here. So I've got my person object, like we covered before. We understand what's going on with him. Then I've declared a function. So there's two things going on here. There's the declaration of the function, and then the execution of the function. Declaration, execution. So I declare the function, which is called print name, and it can take an argument. The things that go here inside these round braces is called an argument. And then here, there's the actual action of the function, which is to take that person's name and print it out. And then down here in the execution of the function, sometimes known as calling the function, when I call the function, first I type out the name of the function, which in this case is print name, and then I pass in the object that the function is going to use. So again, really important to note here, this could be called anything, right? Here, let's say inside the print name function, if I change the name of the argument to be sandwich, and then instead I'm console logging out sandwich name, it's still going to work. It's still going to be exactly the same. I could change it to console log out the age of the sandwich. And here you can see it's a 25-year-old sandwich. You probably shouldn't eat that anymore. But the point of this is that this is just a name. There's nothing magical about it. All this is a new variable that gets created based on whatever it is that I pass in here. So I am passing in the Joseph object. It is then receiving the Joseph object, and then it's doing something with the object. So let's change this back to person. Great. So let's say I had another object, right? What if I duplicated this? Now I've got an additional person. That person is Rohan, because he's my favorite example. And then his the name property for him is going to be Rohan. His age is going to be, I don't know his age. I'm going to guess he's 36. He's 36. He's definitely cool. So we'll change that to true. Is called true. And then children, he does have children actually. I don't know their name, so I'll just make some up. Jonah. His children, Jonah. I wonder if that's really the name of his child. That would be amazing if that was really the name of one of his children. Okay, so now see here where I'm calling the print name Joseph function. What if I pass in the Rohan object now? Look at that, it prints his name, Rohan. I could call them both in a row. First call print Joseph, then call print Rohan. And it does it, Joseph, Rohan. So hopefully you're kind of starting to see what's going on here. The function takes a generic object and then does something with that generic object. Now, let's imagine a bad case scenario, right? What if I had a junk object? What if I had one that's not valid? So let's make a new object here. The object is going to be Ollie, but I'm not going to fill out the information properly. I'm going to, what if I don't include his name, right? And then I've got his age. He's probably like 27 or something. He's definitely cool, and he's got no children. So I haven't included the necessary information for this function to work because the person doesn't have a name field anymore. So now here, I'm going to print name. I'm going to pass in the Ollie object, and then it comes back undefined. So what that means is like this function is trying to access the name property of the person that I pass in, and the person that I pass in does not have a name property, so it's like undefined. I don't know what that means, man. You're going to see the word undefined a lot. It's basically the computer just like throwing its hands up in the air and going, I don't know, what is that? I don't know. So that is what is going on there. Now, what are we going to do next? Let's write a function that returns something. So that's one of the things that we have here listed. We want a function that returns a value. So we're going to write a new function now. Let me just get rid of this stuff here. And then the new function is going to be called return. It's going to be called getAge, and then it is also going to take a generic person object. And then here, this is where the real magic comes in. We're going to write the word return, and then we're going to return person age. So you see what's going to happen here? The function's going to run. Well, we're going to run the function. We're going to pass in a person object, and then it's going to give us back the age of the person. So let's look at how that works in practice. Now, maybe I'll assign it to a new variable. So I'm going to make a variable called Ollie's age, and I'm going to set that to be equal to the return value of getAge, and I'm going to pass Ollie in as the object. So what's going to happen here? We're making a new variable, declaring a new variable, just like we did up here. The name of the variable, what is it equal to? The name of the variable, what is it equal to? And it is equal to the return value of our getAge function. So our getAge function takes a person and then gives us back the person's age. We're declaring a new variable, setting it equal to the return value of getAge Ollie. So we're passing in the Ollie object. It is going to go into this function. It is going to give us back, return us the person's age. And then, just to make sure we're all on the up and up, I'm going to console log out Ollie's age. Oops. And then over here, you can see 27 comes back. So it's successfully pulling it out. And I could even make this a little bit more interesting. I could say console log out Ollie's age is, like this. See what I'm doing now? This is a string, so I'm putting this in some little words here, and then I'm leaving a little space, and then I'm adding on the Ollie's age variable. So now over here, hit return, it says Ollie's age is 27. So this is this concept, the function returning some value. Now I'm going to take another sip of water, and then we are going to kind of dive into our final objective, learning objective for the session, which is if-else statements, this idea of flow control. Oh yeah. Oh, I've got some lime and some salt in the water. It's so good. Okay, so we are going to write a new function now. Let me just get rid of this stuff. So this new function is going to be called decide if person is cool. And then it is also going to take a person object, just like before. So what is going to go on here? Now, let's have a look. What we're going to want to do is, if the person is cool, we're going to get it to console log out the name of the person and that they're cool. And if the person is not cool, then it's going to console log out the name of the person and be like, they're not cool. That's what this function is going to do. So this is where this idea of like pseudocoding kind of comes in. So I could even write this out as comments. I could say, what's this function going to do? If the person is cool, console log out that they are cool. And then here I'm going to be like, otherwise, log out that they're not cool. So you might see this, and this is a good technique for you as well when you're writing your functions, kind of writing the human readable version of it first. So writing out just sort of like a basic instruction list of like, this is kind of what I want the function to do, and then you can sort of focus more clearly on like actually how we're going to do that. And the way that we're going to do that is with an if-else statement. So that's sort of our last objective here. If-else statements. And they look like this. If, and then we're going to pass in some sort of condition here into these round braces. So if person is cool, and you remember is cool is a boolean that exists on our objects. So we're going to say if person is cool, then this code is going to run. And this code is going to console log out, what is it going to console log out? Person.name plus is cool, like that. And then we're going to write the else part of this equation. So that's what's going to happen if the person is cool. And then here, else, this is kind of like your other condition. So like, if the person is cool, then do this. Otherwise, do this. Console log person name. I made a mistake here. See this? I put oh no, I did it right. I reckon it'll be fine. Sorry, I freaked myself out there for a second. Is not cool. Cool. Okay, so I reckon this looks good to me. Let's test it out. I can get rid of my pseudocode there. Now we've just got our nice function. I'm going to leave that space in there. If the person is cool, then we're going to console log out person name is cool. Otherwise we're going to console log out person name is not cool. So let's try calling the function. Decide if person is cool, and then we'll pass me in. Let's refresh it. Oh, missing bracket after argument. So let's see where that's happening. Oh, I see. This is handy, it even tells you exactly where it's happening. So it says line 43, you can see here, it's actually line 45, but whatever, no big deal. Oh no, wait, yeah, no it is. Oh, I did it on both. Alright, so yeah, first we're going to do this, put that there, we're going to do this. Oh no, not there. All over the place, there, and there. So you can see this, I forgot to close these opening brackets. So you've always got to make sure, just like with HTML, you've always got to make sure when you have an opening bracket, you've also got a closing bracket. So let's refresh this. Joseph is not cool. Oh no, I thought that I was. No, I'm not. Damn, that was a mistake. Oh well, let's just go with it for the time being. So now let's say I'm going to duplicate these lines, and then here I'm going to pass in Rohan, and here I'm going to pass in Ollie. So you can see now it says Joseph is not cool, Rohan is cool, and undefined is cool. Oh, right, that's because we didn't set a name. So this, look at that, it all comes back together. So you can see there are a few bugs in our program here, but bug number one, biggest bug of all, is that I am listed as not cool. So let's just fix that right now. Joseph is cool. And then bug number two, we don't have an age for, a name for Ollie. So in the Ollie field, we're going to put name Ollie, like that. Now if we run it again, it should be functioning as intended. Oh. Uh-oh. Unexpected identifier, line 27. What's that about? Oh, right, I forgot to put a comma in there. Ka-ching. Cool. Joseph is cool, Rohan is cool, Ollie is cool. And there we have it. That pretty much covers all of our learning objectives for the session. So we learned about the relationship between HTML and CSS. We learned how to link the JavaScript file to the HTML document, just this bit right here. We learned about using console log to log out messages into our things, kind of like a little window into your program. We learned about, let me just open this up again. We learned about variables, how to declare variables, the name of the variable, and then an equal sign. We learned about these different data types, strings, integers, bools, and arrays. We learned about functions, objects. We learned how to make objects, how to make them look good, both by passing in key value pairs with a variable as the value, and key value pairs where we're just writing in the value manually. And then we learned about functions. So how do you write a function? What do the functions do? Decide if the person is cool. And it's like, this is the fun thing about it, you know, is like I could just bang out functions all day long. Function, add two numbers, and then it's going to take number A and number B. Then we're going to open it up and we're going to be like, hey, return A plus B, and then close it off. And then here you can see now I'm going to go down here and I'm going to be like console log, add two numbers, and then I'm going to add in like 4 and 7, and then I'm going to have another one like this, and then I'm going to have another one where I add in 4 and that huge number, and another one where I add in like 2 and 3 or whatever. You can see now I refresh it and then here's all the stuff here. So like once you kind of get your head in your hands around this idea of like writing out functions and calling them and all that kind of stuff, you can just boom, 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 programming all day, you know. And we talked about if-else statements. So we did this little thing up here, decide if the person was cool. If they are cool, then log this out. Otherwise, log that out. So this was a pretty long session for today. We covered a lot of different topics, but hopefully this kind of like gives you a nice little crash course into some of the introductory stuff that we're going to be covering this week. And that is it. Good luck. Remember to be kind to yourself when all of this stuff seems hard and complicated. Give it time. Just remember that like anyone can learn this stuff. There's nothing magical about it. There's nothing magical about people who can do these things, you know. I was a barista, and I'm awful at math. Dropped out of university 3 times because I can't pass Math 101. None of that is necessary. This is just like writing. It's just like creative writing with a really, really strict copy editor who will burn your manuscript into ashes if you put a comma in the wrong place. But yeah, don't worry. You will get this. It just takes a little bit of time. And yeah, good luck to you. I'll see you soon. Goodbye.